All right, one last question for John. This is so vital and it's so important. Jacqueline mentioned that she's seen this idea that coronavirus is a judgment from God all over social media. I think if you are on social media, you've seen that, or you may have heard pastors say that or something. So, John, could you just speak to that idea for a second?
Yeah, these are easy questions, man.
Yeah,
Thanks.
really.
All right, is coronavirus a judgment from God? It's interesting when you look at like the scope of the Bible, from the story of Adam and Eve in the garden to God basically introducing himself to Abraham, leading up to Jesus in the New Testament and Paul and everyone that came after. This whole arc of the Bible is built on this restoration and reconciliation narrative. I heard this idea that the gospel can be summed up in 4 words: creation, fall, redemption, and restoration. And so you have this Old Testament story where a lot of this judgment language in the Bible is primarily like only found is in the Old Testament. And these people who are wrestling with this idea that there's one God, that there aren't many gods, and that God is trying to grow his people and mature his people. And there are some painful situations that they go through. But if the tail end of the gospel is redemption and restoration, redemption happened through Jesus. And so God is in the work post-Jesus in restoring all things. The coronavirus is just the result of living in a broken world and in a fallen world. It's not a judgment from God. The Bible says, Paul wrote this after Jesus, that God works together all things for good. And we've been talking about this whole year that the character of God is summed up in the word love. That's who God is, and that's who God calls us to be. And he so loved us by sending his son that he calls us to love and live in that same way. So a loving God is not going to judge his people by sending a plague or this, pandemic like the coronavirus to cause fear and anxiety and pain. All of those things are counter to the character of who God is. And so is the coronavirus a judgment from God? Absolutely not. But does God have a plan through all of this? Was God surprised by any of this? Absolutely not. God knew this was coming, and God can work good from this situation as he's restoring and as he's reconciling us and other people to himself.
I love that, man. That's so good. One of my favorite passages is where in John, where it talks about how the thief, Satan, and the kind of the dark powers come to steal and kill and destroy, but Jesus came, God in the flesh came, that we may have life and life abundantly. And so that's what he wants for us, life and life abundantly, even in the midst of something as crazy and difficult as the coronavirus that's a result of this fallen, broken world.